To discuss the significance of this Sunday's parliamentary elections in Venezuela, we now welcome James Early, a board member of US think tank, the Institute for Policy Studies, and former Assistant Secretary of Education and Public Service at the Smithsonian Institution. James, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, a very important occasion.
Indeed it is, James. How important do you think this Sunday's elections are for Venezuela?
Well, first and foremost, it's critically important inside Venezuela because it really does advance democracy based on the Constitution in a peaceful mode. When you've got 100 and odd parties, groups vying through the election process, 98 or so of them who are members of the opposition, it is an objective indicator that people do have ideological and political individual voice. Their voices are not being suppressed. And of course, because there are something like 277 seats that are being contested with literally over 1,000 or so people vying for those, it's a really healthy expression of democracy and a great hope that now we will see those who would use violence and those who would invite external regime change and economic warfare to frustrate the will of the people. Hopefully now we will see that the strength of voices inside Venezuela will be able to push that back and to really deal with their own serious internal challenges and problems.
James, what kind of coverage have these elections received in the United States?
Very little, almost none. And of course, there's a major prejudice, not to mention the right wing in the United States, led by the fascist, racist, open regime change wing of the Republican Party under Donald Trump and Pompeo from the State Department, but more significantly from the so-called liberal press, the CNNs, the MSNBC, which buy into the centrist Democratic Party liberal perspectives, actually initiated last from a legislative point of view or a presidential point of view by Barack Obama, last president, who deemed that Venezuela was a threat to the national security. And of course, then the right wing picks this up. And so that there is a mechanical step of the Democratic Party inhabiting that. Now, with regard to social media and alternative press, there is a more open, objective discussion, debate, and review of the dynamics of democracy inside Venezuela. And they all feel that it is very important that all parties come to the table and find a way of negotiating.
James, you mentioned some of the policy in terms of the United States and its policy towards Venezuela. What do you think, if anything, could change in terms of US policy towards Venezuela following this Sunday's election?
Well, it is hopeful that the new centrist administration, which would also like to overthrow the Bolivarian revolution and remove the legitimately elected Maduro government, it is hoped that they will now see that the majority of the opposition is for internal dialogue against regime change and against these ridiculous theatrics of Guaido having been named and supported by European countries and the United States as a so-called president without receiving one vote for that. That is indeed the hope. How will that be manifest? It will be hopefully manifest by these opposition parties coming together with the Maduro government to petition the United States and Western Europe to step back and support the internal dialogue. That would be the first step. The second step is to be embedded within Latin America itself to push back against the so-called Lima group, which is tied into the United States control of the Organization of American States, and to demand of them that they not interfere with the internal negotiation of serious ideological and political differences among Venezuelans. But what Venezuelans all hold in common beyond those differences is the suffering that has been caused by the economic crisis and exacerbated by the economic embargo warfare imposed by the United States. And thirdly, to build communication not only with progressives and left-wingers in the United States who are actively involved in supporting Venezuelan sovereignty and independence and self-determination, but looking to the democratic socialists who are being elected in the US Congress, looking to the other de facto social democracy politicians who want a different kind of foreign policy, and to begin to build communications with them, for them to also support the self-determined, independent, sovereign dialogue and debate towards resolution among the various parties within Venezuela.
James, thank you so much for joining us and for offering your valuable insight into this Sunday's parliamentary elections in Venezuela and the view from there in the United States. Thank you so much.